Bhavavratadhara yecha yecha tan samanuvrataha yecha tan samanuvrataha pashandinaste bhavantu pashandinaste bhavantu Tachastra paripanthina Sachastra paripanthina Bhavavrata yecha yecha tan samanuvrataha Pashandinaste bhavantu Sachastra paripanthina Namaste bhavantu Bhavavrata yecha Namaste bhavantu Paripanthinaha Bhavavrata yecha Word for word. Bhavavrata dhara taken a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva. Ye, who, cha, and ye, who, cha, and tan, such principles. Samanuvrataha, following. Pashandinaha, atheists. Te, they. Bhavantu, let them become. Sat Shastra Paripanthinaha, diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: one who takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva, or who follows such principles, will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. Purport: it is sometimes seen that devotees of Lord Shiva imitate the characteristics of Lord Shiva. For example, Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison, so some of the followers of Lord Shiva imitate him and try to take intoxicants like ganja, marijuana. Here the curse is that if someone follows such principles, he must become an infidel and turn against the principles of Vedic regulations. It is said that such devotees of Lord Shiva will be Satchastra Paripantinaha, which means opposed to the conclusion of Shastra or scripture. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana also. Lord Shiva was ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to preach the impersonal or Mayavad philosophy for a particular purpose, just as Lord Buddha preached the philosophy of voidness for particular purposes mentioned in the Shastras. Sometimes it is necessary to preach a philosophical doctrine which is against the Vedic conclusions. In the Shiva Purana it is stated that Lord Shiva said to Parvati that in the Kali Yuga, in the body of a Brahmana, he would preach the Mayavad philosophy. Thus it is generally found that the worshippers of Lord Shiva are Mayavadi followers. Lord Shiva himself says, Mayavadam Asat Shastram. Asat Shastra, as explained here, means the doctrine of Mayavad impersonalism, or becoming one with the Supreme. Bhrigu Muni cursed the persons who worshipped Lord Shiva would become followers of this Mayavada Asat Shastra, which attempts to establish that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is impersonal. Besides that, among the worshippers of Lord Shiva, there is a section who live in a devilish life. Srimad Bhagavatam and Narada Pancharatra are authorized scriptures that are considered such Shastra, or scriptures which lead one to the path of God realization. Such Shastras are just the opposite. Bhavavrata dhara yecha tan samanuvrataha pashandinasti bhavantu Shastra paripantina. One who takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva, or who follows such principles, will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. Umagyanatimirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurum miritam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurok Shri Yutapada Kamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganaragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyaya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Rutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Vandayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vandeshi Gurum Dinataranam. Yesterday, Mataji Aruna gave a very detailed and elaborate description of causes for this showdown between the followers of Lord Shiva and the followers of the Vedas. Bhrigu Muni is speaking this verse now. Sometimes in such situations we may be bewildered into thinking that we have to necessarily take sides in Vaishnava's altercation. When there are some arguments and disagreements, our tendency is, and there are Shastric backings for that, for this notion, like Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu explains that when we see or hear someone blaspheme the Supreme Lord or his devotees, then it is pure devotional service to be intolerant of such offenses. He says asahishnuta. Asahishnuta means intolerance. So to not tolerate such offenses is pure devotional service, and to the contrary, someone who tolerates such offenses becomes an offender himself. There are descriptions given to different categories of people in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and also in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I believe it will be coming up later on when Sati will come and speak with her father Daksha, that devotees should take to different means to stop the offense. Some radical, almost like surgical ones, when we cut out the tongue of the offender, and more Brahminical, to leave the place or to give up one's life, for instance. So different options, but tolerating an offense is not an option. But sometimes we're too quick to judge what is an offense, and we identify ourselves with, as Lord Shiva himself says humorously and also very seriously in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, speaks about himself, that I am, in my conceit, I think myself to be the liberated giver of liberation, the all-knowing giver of knowledge of the Vedas, and the devoted grantor of devotion to others. So we may be too quick to identify ourselves with truth. And when Sanjaya concludes Bhagavad Gita, he says that wherever is Krishna, there we have everything. We have victory, we have piety, we have dharma, everything is there where Krishna is. But we shouldn't assume that Krishna is wherever we are. We should be careful and very perceptive and humble to think about Krishna as being completely independent and not subordinate to our ideas about ourselves. So that's what distinguishes a devotee. He or she they do not think that they are devotees. They are at awe with the worship of and the devotional service of great devotees of the past, like Rupa Goswami says in his Stavamala, when I think Prachinanam Bhajanamatulam Dushkaram Srinvatam, when I hear about this unparalleled service of great devotees of the past, Prachinanam Dushkaram Srinvatam, when I hear about that, I become morose. Yes, because I cannot muster even a fraction of that devotion, and I'm lazy and unfortunate, and the only thing that I have is that drop of hope that just by remembering the example of these great devotees of the past, something will rub off me of their devotional service. They'll bless me by my remembering them and trying to emulate, if not the scope of their devotional service, but at least the mood, or at least the aspiration. Somehow or other we should try and cling to those pure devotees of the past and present. It's not that all these devotees are in the past only. No, there are devotees in the present, but devotees are very expert. They are expertly hiding their glories, their exalted position, and it's very difficult to identify themselves sometimes. It's only when they pass away and then we remember, oh yes, actually we were fortunate to live with such a pure devotee who was amongst ourselves, and we didn't recognize him, because Krishna respects his desire to hide and disguise himself or herself as an ordinary person, and he doesn't interfere with that. Sometimes, of course, Krishna's desire to glorify his devotees gets the better of him, so he does that, despite devotees' unwillingness. Sometimes, but not always. So we should be very careful and see the devotees around us as by default pure, by default, by definition exalted, by default and by definition more exalted than ourselves, unless proven otherwise. But who will be there to prove otherwise? It's somebody who is actually responsible, is charged with responsibility to help the devotee improve his or her devotional service. Generally, the spiritual master's jurisdiction. That's what Prabhupada said in one of the classes. I think it was in Sydney. No, it wasn't Melbourne. Maybe Sydney. Anyway, one of these two places. When one young devotee came to Prabhupada's class, and after the class, he had been around enough to start seeing faults in devotees. Initially, when we come, we see no faults. We hardly see the devotees themselves because they're so effulgent. All of them are so bright-faced and pure and much better than ourselves. That's evident, that's obvious. But then as we get used to the association of devotees, we start misapplying our discriminatory power and seeing them as bad or good or more exalted, less exalted. Anyhow, he's been long enough, that devotee. So, and he was not initiated yet. His name was Misha. It's there in the transcript. And actually I heard that conversation. And he said, Swami, Srila Prabhupada and some of your disciples, they become first initiated, second initiated, and then they start deviating from the principles of devotional service. What should we do to to like chasten them, to make them come back to the right path? Maybe because they deviate from the spiritual path, and then they come back again and expect to have the same respect as they used to have before. It's not humble, he said. We should probably try to discipline them somehow. Maybe they should be given some very humble, menial service. And he wanted to continue his train of thought, but Prabhupada cut him off and he said, it's not for you to decide. He has his spiritual master, it's for him to decide. It's not your jurisdiction. That's the exact word Prabhupada used. Mind your own business. It's for the spiritual master, he'll decide. All you can do is inform the spiritual master if he's not informed already, because usually when something goes wrong, there are too eager well-wishers to report. When something goes right, you do hear, but not as often that you come to the spiritual master or some senior devotee and tell him or her, look at your disciple, such a wonderful devotee, so nice, so sincere, please bless him. This should be our modus operandi, should be our primary mode of interaction with devotees. See the glorious things in them and trying to amplify them, just like Krishna himself does. So Prabhupada cut him off and he said, it's not for you to decide. He has a jurisdiction. He has his spiritual master. It's for him to decide, not for you. And then devotee tried to continue. Prabhupada again cut him off. He said, no, it's not for you. It's not your jurisdiction. And the devotee finally said, can you give an example? And Prabhupada, yes, of course I can give an example. Just like the police. The police can arrest a suspected criminal, but then they cannot judge the police cannot judge the so-called criminal themselves, because they have to bring him to the court of law, and the judge will decide. If the police try to adjudicate that wrongdoing, they themselves become criminals. It's a criminal act to take justice in your hands and apply it as you wish. Like that. So have to be careful when we hear such altercations between devotees, as it is explained also in the Shastra from, I believe, Narahari Sarakari Thakur, from what, if I'm not wrong, but it's definitely mentioned somewhere, that when we hear devotees arguing with each other, the safest and Vaishnava, the most Vaishnava-like behavior in that situation is to just stay away as much as possible, to preserve respect for both sides, unless we're given this responsibility to interfere and decide who's right and who's wrong. That's how Jiva Goswami defines a Vaishnava. There are many definitions of a Vaishnava. Like there are some formal definitions. If Vaishnava is someone who wears tilak and wears a tulsi mala, kanthi mala, and chants Hare Krishna, or there is a very generous definition of a Vaishnava is someone who participates in karma kanda, yagyas, and occasionally chants the name of Vishnu, invoking his presence in the karma kanda. There are many definitions. Finally, everyone is a Vaishnava. Srila Prabhupada even gives an even more generous definition. In the second canto of Bhagavatam, he says that a Vaishnava is someone who has faith, who believes that by being a Vaishnava, one attains perfection in life. That's already Vaishnava. If you have faith, like some of our friends and relatives and family members, they may not want to become Vaishnavas, but somehow they become so inspired by seeing their kids or their parents or their siblings become devotees and develop good qualities, that they say, oh yes, if I were a devotee, I would have become a better human being. So by that faith, they already become Vaishnavas. So it's a generous definition of Vaishnava, but Jiva Goswami gives a very relevant for this discussion, a very relevant definition of a Vaishnava. He says a Vaishnava is someone who, when offended, when chastised with strong words and being subjected to wrath and curses, Tiraskrita vipralabda kshapta kshipta hatamapi mata jaruna, yesterday quoted that verse from the first canto of Bhagavatam. He doesn't retaliate, and also he or she they try to speak back in pleasing words to calm down the irritated and angry offender. He says this is a Vaishnava. That's how the behavior distinguishes a Vaishnava or Vaishnavi, because ultimately they see what is a Vaishnava. Vaishnava grammatically is Vishnu Yasya Devata Saha, is defined as someone who has Vishnu as his or her deity, the highest goal of life. Devata doesn't necessarily mean just an object of worship, but in this particular case it means that they make him, Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, the ultimate goal of their lives, so that everything, all other goals, are subjugated to this goal. And that by itself cancels out all their shortcomings and imperfections. That's not my words, Prabhupada says that. When we speak about, sometimes we throw around that charge of being impersonalist too lightly. Sometimes we hear, of course devotees use it poetically, sometimes you're an impersonalist, this is impersonalism, this is impersonal. That's a very heavy accusation to speak about the Vaishnava as an impersonalist, a Mayavadi. Well, we would hope we don't call devotees Mayavadis, but sometimes that impersonalism charge is being used and applied to devotees too lightly. Listen to what Srila Prabhupada says. It's a very famous letter. I'm sure you all heard it many times, but just like so many other things we hear many times, beginning with the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So we should also refresh these instructions by Srila Prabhupada, which I find extremely important. Maybe we should even, as a daily practice, at least I remember it quite often, these statements by Srila Prabhupada when we have to deal with devotees and something goes wrong in our dealings with them. Prabhupada writes in his famous letter to Atreya Rishi in 1971, when Atreya Rishi, apparently I didn't read the letter that he sent to Prabhupada, even though these letters are available on request from the Bhaktivedanta archives. You can get, probably, if it's not too intimate and too confidential, you can also read what prompted Prabhupada's response. Sometimes it's important to hear the context, what exactly prompted Prabhupada's particular response. But still, regardless, we don't know what Atreya Rishi Prabhu wrote to Prabhupada, what he complained about. Like on another instance, one devotee, Prabhupada's disciple, and a sannyasi already, he was sent to Japan. Or maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that geographical, anyhow, it's already too late. He was sent to Japan with some other god brothers, and they had to serve cooperatively, but somehow that other devotee's character was not, should I say, up to the liking of this devotee, this particular devotee, as happens oftentimes. So he wrote, and he tried to tolerate it, and it continued for some time, but then he wrote to Prabhupada with a letter of complaint, saying that I cannot take it any longer. I want to quit. I cannot stay with him. I cannot work with him because he's very aggressive and belligerent and feisty even. Sometimes he would get into a physical fight. so I had enough. Can I just be relieved of that? Can I go elsewhere and serve you somewhere else? So what Prabhupada wrote to him, he said, yes, I understand his shortcomings. I know them very well. I know the background he came from. Well, I'm just a little bit paraphrasing, not quoting Prabhupada's verbatim, but that's what he wrote. He said, I understand, yeah, he's very difficult to get along with and to be in his presence, but you're a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is meant to tolerate others. So I ask you, I beg you, please tolerate him just like I tolerate you. That's what he wrote to him. You please tolerate him just like I tolerate you. So Prabhupada wrote in this letter, a famous letter to Atreya Rishi, it's not so much that because there may be some faults in our god brothers and god sisters, or because there may be some mismanagement or lack of cooperation, that this is due to being impersonalists. No, No, because Atreya Rishi complained to him about devotees being non-cooperative. And you know, if you're a manager, I don't know if any of your managers, but there are managers, I'm sure, in this temple, well-managed temple. So if when you're a manager, then it's a very thankless task to tell the devotees what they should be doing. Because devotees are free. They're liberated souls, right? So liberated, there is no levers, no buttons you can push or pull to make devotees do what needs to be done. So managers in a spiritual society are, it's a very difficult task sometimes. Like Niranjana Maharaj joked once, having been a manager for decades in ISKCON, he said, I can give you managers or leaders, I can give you a life hack. If you want to shock someone, just take a decision, any decision, regardless of what the decision is. Just take any decision, somebody will be shocked, guaranteed. And if you take a decision not to take decisions, that will also shock someone, and will also be complaints, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't, as they say in English. So Atreya Rishi complained about devotees being non-cooperative and doing their own things. So Prabhupada writes back to him. He says, it's not that because there are maybe some faults in our God brothers and sisters, or because there may be some mismanagement or lack of cooperation that is due to being impersonalists. No, it is the nature of the living condition to always have some faults. It comes as a relief to us, but not to managers, I guess. Everyone has some faults, and we have to live with it. And then Prabhupada continues, giving an example. Even in the spiritual world, there is some fault and envy. Sometimes the gopis will quarrel over Krishna's favor, and once Krishna was so much attracted to Radharani that by mistake he tried to milk the bull instead of the cow. And sometimes when the gopis used to put on their dress and makeup for seeing Krishna, they would be too much hasty and smear kumkum and mascara in the wrong places, and their ornaments and dresses would appear as if small children had been trying to dress themselves, and they were not very expert like that. So Prabhupada, as if he takes that picture of the spiritual world, because you cannot see descriptions of this kind in the Shastras so much. The acharyas are windows into the spiritual world. They describe their experiences, their, as Jiva Goswami explains, Vaidusha Pratyaksha, their direct experience of the spiritual reality. And that's why it's futile to and reckless to demand spiritual backings, shastric backings for what the acharyas say. They are the shastric backing, because the shastra comes, as Jiva Goswami explains, from Vaidusha Pratyaksha, from the perception of the pure, exalted souls. This is called Shastra Mulatva. Shastra Mulatva, Shabda Mulatva, excuse me. Shabda Mulatva means that the words of the great souls are the foundation, Mula, of the Shastra. So Prabhupada describes here that Krishna tried to milk the bull instead of the cow, and the gopis rushed to see Krishna in the dead of night. They put on mascara and kumkum, and they try to dress themselves, and they do it in the wrong way. And they come dressed as if, Prabhupada says, small children were playing, and they were trying to put some clothes on themselves, and they were not very expert. It's very funny. Prabhupada says like that. I hope none of us come running to Mangalarati, even though we cannot really rule that out. If somebody shows up for Mangalarati, like in Jaipur, in Rajasthan, the whole city of Jaipur goes running to Mangalarati of Lord Govinda, and all of them, old ladies and young men, a big crowd, they just run towards the temple, and they cry out, Govinda, 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 as they run, and watch out, they're so eager they can just shovel you aside if you're not careful, because of their eagerness. It's compared that the pure devotion of such great exalted Vaishnavas is compared to the stream of the Ganges. The Ganges flows to the ocean, and there is no way to stop it. She will always find her way to the ocean, whether it's by overcoming the obstacle, the dam that you put in its course, or it can go around, or it can just wash it aside. Regardless, she will get to her desired destination. So pure devotees, they do like that, and they disregard social conventions such as proper dressing code sometimes. But again, in our temples, we should, even if we do have these kind of emotions, Prabhupada explains, we should calm ourselves and as much as possible, follow the rules and regulations that are prescribed for ordinary devotees, devotees who haven't yet developed this kind of spontaneous intense devotion. Seva sadhaka rupina siddha rupina chatrahi tad bhava lipsuna karya. Brajaloka Nusaratam, Rupa Goswami explains that even the great exalted Mahabhagavatas who have already realized their spiritual identity, they behave externally as obedient and perfect disciplined sadhakas. So don't see them manifesting these kind of emotions too often. They do that when no one is watching. Like Srila Prabhupada himself would also manifest such emotions, but we have very few accounts of that. Anyway, Prabhupada continues. There are so many examples, but it is not the same as material fault or material envy. It is transcendental because it is all based on Krishna. Sometimes when one gopi would serve Krishna very nicely, the others would say, "Oh, she has done so nicely. Now let me do better for pleasing Krishna." That is envy, but it's transcendental without malice. In the same way, when the cowherd men or cowherd boys, when Krishna goes with them to the forest of Vrindavan, and he first they walk with the calves and cows, but then, because as Srila Prabhupada would sometimes say, when it make one step towards Krishna, Krishna makes how many steps? 100,000? I guess it depends. It really depends on the steps we take, right? Some thousands, some 100, maybe one, maybe he goes back. I don't know. In some cases, no, I don't want to see. Don't come near me. Don't come anywhere close, right? So he goes on reverse, backs out of our company. It's also a possibility, but usually he takes 100 steps, and Krishna has large steps. Vikrama Burbhuvah Svascha Kshemasya Sharanasya Cha Sarva Kama Varasya Pi Haresh Charana Aspadam. In the Bhagavatam it says that Krishna's steps, why he's called Rukrama, because they're large, they're very big steps. Two steps he can cover the entire universe, right? And he takes how many? 100 such steps. So if one takes a very small step towards Krishna, Krishna goes out of his way literally to see such a devotee. So when cowherd boys and Krishna go to the forest of Vrindavan, and the forest of Vrindavan is very eager to see Krishna and to speed up their meeting with Krishna. But according to the script of Raja Lila, the forest cannot walk. You don't see walking trees in Vrindavan. They can. They are completely free. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita it is explained that such devotees are completely free, just like as Krishna. Krishna is free to do whatever he wants, and so are his devotees and his Dhamma, his holy abode. But again, according to the Lila, the script, they're given a specific role, and this role is stationary. They have to stay in one place, and have to show their eagerness by some means which wouldn't force them to move out of their stationary place. And the trees, they try to ooze with honey, and they decorate their branches with flowers, and then the birds, they can fly to Krishna, but they have to be in the forest. That's their Prabhu Datta Dish service. So they sit on the branches, and as if they're painted on a canvas. They do not move, but the trees move. The non-moving living entities become moving, and the very restless and mobile living entities like birds and does, they stay in one place as if painted. And they all are very eager to see Krishna come. So when Krishna senses this anticipation of the forest of Vrindavan, what does he do? He speeds up, and then he breaks into a run. So he starts running towards Krishna, towards the forest of Vrindavan. Иди дуре гатах Krishna, Vana subhekshana tam, when he wants to bless the forest of Vrindavana by his presence. So he, out of his eagerness, starts running towards the forest of Vrindavana. And then Aham Purvam, eti sansprishya remire, and then his cowherd boys start chasing him. And every one of them says, Aham Purvam, I will touch Krishna first. No, I will touch Krishna first. Eti sansprishya. Sansprishya means they're trying to touch Krishna, chasing after him, running after him, so they could be as fast as him. And all of them, they create a competition. You know, the many cowherd boys, like you see sometimes in the Olympic Games, there are marathons or races and people run, and it's very crowded. Sometimes, at least initially, it's crowded. So there's very little room, and there are so many cowherd boys. How many? Asankyata, as many as you cannot. There's not enough numbers in this world to count. Just like the cows are asankyata, they're uncountable, innumerable, and the calves. So they start chasing Krishna. Aham purvam, iti sansprishya remere. I'll try Krishna. I'll touch Krishna first. No, I will touch Krishna first. So this is the kind of competition Prabhupada speaks about in this letter. It's devoid of malice, because when they run towards Krishna, trying to run fast, what they are trying to do, they're trying to encourage other boys to run even faster by their eagerness to touch Krishna. Whereas in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is another instance when the demons, they also competed for the pot of nectar brought to them by Mohini Murti. And they said exactly the same thing. Mithoa kalira buddhisham tadartha tarsha chetasam. The demons were completely overwhelmed with that competitive spirit, and they said, aham purvam, the exact same words. But what is different in the demons' competition, they added, natvam, iti prabhu. I'll be first, but not you, and not you. So this is malice. This is malice, when someone's achievements, someone's superiority is intolerable for us. That's how Srila Prabhupada defines envy. Envy is the inability to tolerate someone's superiority. When someone exceeds us in some way, I cannot tolerate it, and I try to pull him down somehow or other. So that's what Prabhupada speaks about in this letter. See, each line can be opened up into a whole description of the spiritual world. Everything is here. The whole Shastra is in Prabhupada's words. And he continues. This is envy, but it's transcendental, without malice. So we shall not expect that anywhere there is any utopia in our movement. Utopia is a imaginary world created by, I think there was a medieval philosopher, Tommaso Campanella, from what I remember from the school's lessons in history. And he imagined an ideal world. That's called utopia. And Prabhupada speaks about it. And he says, so we do not expect that anywhere there will be utopia in our movement. Rather, that is impersonalism. There is impersonalism. And impersonalism manifests in our midst by thinking that devotees should be ideal. That everything will be according to my liking. That is impersonalism. People should not expect that even in the Krishna consciousness society there will be utopia, because devotees are persons. Therefore, there will always be some lacking, because they're persons. But the difference is that they're lacking because they have given up everything to serve Krishna: money, jobs, reputation, wealth, big education, everything. I guess you can relate to this list, some of you, right? I was told that some of the devotees living here in ashram are top class software engineers and programmers, which usually garners very well-paid, lucrative job in the outer world. But I also know that they put that to very good use here in the temple. But anyhow, money, jobs, reputation, wealth, big education, everything. Because of that, they have given up everything to serve Krishna. Their lackings have become transcendental, because despite everything they may do, their topmost intention is to serve Krishna. And then Prabhupada quotes Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita: one who is engaged in devotional service, despite the most abominable action, is to be considered saintly. Please help me. This is started verse from the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Apichet. Thank you very much. Apichet sudura charo bhajati mamananima. Sadur eva samantavyaha. And Krishna says, this is my order. You must consider him a saintly person. And Vishwanath Thakur explains in his commentary that Arjuna argues, how is that? Is it that always? Maybe only that portion where he or she does something nice, then this is sadhu. Then he is sadhu. When he manages to do something good, then he is a sadhu. And Krishna angrily says, no, always. The entire being of the devotee has become permeated, saturated with that sadhutva, because he has taken to the devotional service. Samyak vyavasita hisaha, because of that determination that cancels out all other lackings and shortcomings in his or her life, except for those who are responsible for his spiritual life. They must see faults. It's their service, just like a doctor. Doctors, they sign that oath legally. It's legally binding to preserve medical confidentiality. You cannot reveal to anyone what the patient told you, what you discovered in his or her body. Just like in Australia, I had that experience that when you go to a radiologist, take an X-ray, so they just seal it. You cannot open it. It's not even for you. It's only for the doctor. Even you cannot see it, right? So it has to be sealed, because people start imagining things when they see their X-rays and become distressed. It's only for the doctor, not for you, for no one else. It's confidential. So, but there are doctors, they can prescribe treatments, sometimes even painful treatments. The doctors may chastise sometimes the patient, and sometimes they should chastise the patient. You fool, what do you do with your life? You'll die if you don't change your lifestyle. Like that. So they can chastise to make the patient reasonable. So the same is here. Devotees may have faults, but it's only for those who are appointed and empowered to see those faults in them for their good, for their benefit, not for anyone else. And the qualification for someone to be in such a position to see faults in others for their betterment is that he or she shouldn't have a desire to see faults. Just like a surgeon, one of the qualifications for the surgeon is that he shouldn't like to cut people too much. If he likes to cut people, he's not a surgeon. They call them serial killers, like maniacs. Like that. If he likes to stab people with knives, no. He should minimize the injury, minimize the pain, minimize the intervention to the bare minimum. Make it as painless, as little damaging as possible. So that's the qualification. So Prabhupada continues. Because they cannot, the devotees of Krishna are the most exalted persons on the planet. Better than kings, all of them. So we should always remember that, and like the bumblebee, always look for the nectar of the best qualities of a person. Not like the utopians, who are like the flies, who always go to the open source, S-O-R-E-S, source. Not open source like software, Ubuntu or Linux. No, it's open source, S-O-R-E-S, source. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describing his condition, he says, Vaigunya kita kalitach paishunya vrana piditach danyarna vanimagnoham chaitanya vaidya ashraye. I take shelter of the best of physicians, chaitanya vaidya ashraye, by falling into the ocean of humility. Danyarna vanimagnoham. I fall into the ocean of humility. Danyarna vanimagnoham. Surrendering to the best of physicians, Lord Chaitanya, and I come to him with two diseases, two medical conditions. Vaigunya kita kalitam, kalita pashunya vrana pidita. I am infected with the germs of material desires. The germs of material desires sometimes are very tenacious, and like you have the super infections these days, you can be cured with regular antibiotics, right? Very dangerous, because nothing can cure you because of the super infections who are not afraid of the antibiotics. Maybe they even feed on those antibiotics and they become stronger. So he says, I am infected with the germs of material desires and material activity. That's the exact word I think Chaitanya Charitamrita uses. Vaigunya kita kalitah, paishunya vrana piditah. And vrana means sores, open sores on the body. And I'm covered with the sores of envy. Sometimes envy seems to be completely, to us, we think no one sees our envy. But sores are an external condition. Everyone sees that. So I come with these two conditions. Material activities, material desires in the heart, and sores of they call them trophic ulcers sometimes, something that cannot be cured so well, because they gradually eat away at the person's limbs and body, very dangerous condition. So I come to the best of physicians asking him to please cure me, and the condition for that is I have to fall in the ocean of humility. Danyarna venimagnoham. That's where the treatment starts. So Prabhupada continues. I'll finish this. I was not going to dedicate the entire discussion to this letter by Srila Prabhupada. It was just a small illustration for today's topic. But somehow it just happened this way. Please forgive me. So, so Prabhupada continues. The devotees of Krishna, we shouldn't be like utopians who are like the flies who go to the open source or find the faults in a person, and because they cannot find any utopia, or because they cannot find anyone without faults, they want to become void, merge, nothing. They think that that is utopia, to become void of personality. So interestingly how Prabhupada combines this philosophical conviction. Mayavad philosophy is a philosophical conviction which is very deeply ingrained in the conditioned soul's psychic. It originates from the spiritual worlds, from our departure from the spiritual world, when we have that original pure condition, prema, which is characterized by the sense of possessiveness of Krishna. We think that Krishna, Mamatvati Shayankitaha, we think that Krishna is mine. And Krishna agrees to consider himself the property of his devotees. So much so that in the spiritual world everyone has his own Krishna, or her own Krishna. And there are no two Krishnas there. Everyone has a unique feature. Sanatana Goswami explains that. He says in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam that Krishna is called Gunatma. His name Gunatma means that he manifests unlimited qualities. He also manifests live in the qualities of devotees. He fills them up with spiritual substance. That's another meaning of the word Gunatma. He is the soul of gunas, or qualities of his devotees. But the third meaning is very important for us, is that Krishna manifests a unique confidential quality for each and every one of his unlimited devotees, and only that devotee and Krishna know that quality. That's what distinguishes each and every one of us from each other in the spiritual world. The Krishna we are needed for Krishna to manifest a specific unique quality which no one else can manifest in him. So we're thinking about, I just got digressed from that line of thought. Yes, so prema, that's original prema, the condition of possessiveness of Krishna in the spiritual world. But when we come to the material world, and Prabhupada explains that our prema becomes sour, it curdles, just like milk curdles when it's touched by a sour substance, and it turns into lust, kama, and also another substance. There are two substances. When you curdle milk, how many ingredients do you get usually? You get two. You get curd, and also you get whey. So it separates into two, whey and curd. So in the same way that prema separates into two emotions in the material world. Originally, prema is directed towards Krishna, completely selfless, and it's the epitome of anukulyatva, means desire to do good for Krishna, whatever it takes. So there are two qualities. It's directed to Krishna, and it wants the best for Krishna. Anukulyana Krishna Anushilanam. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the word Anukula is the name of Srimati Radharani. That's how she appears in the definition of pure devotional service. Anukulyana Krishna Anushilanam. She's there. Anukulyana means by the mercy of Srimati Radharani, basically. Anukulyana Krishna Anushilanam. So when that prema becomes curdled, it separates into two emotions strongly prevalent in this world. And combinedly, if you remove their bad qualities, somehow, if there is a way to turn it back, of course there is no way to turn it back. Once it's curdled, it's done. You cannot do anything with it. Once we were making halwa for the Sunday program, and we wanted to make it with milk, and that milk curdled. So, what can you do? You cannot do anything now. You only paneer and put it in the subject, but even that is questionable, especially if you manage to put sugar into that milk before it curdles, so you can just throw it away. So it curdles, it separates into two emotions, kama and irsha. Irsha means envy or malice. And they inherit these two qualities of prema. Kama is very favorable. It's always anukula, kama, right? But who it is anukula for? For me. I desire spontaneously, selflessly, what's that? Ahaitu kya pratihata? To me. I am the recipient of my love for myself. But it's karma. We can do that. Everyone does that for millions of lifetimes. Jantur Vaibhava etasmin yam yam yonim anu vrajet tasyam nalabhyate nivriti navirajyate, Kapila Deva says. Regardless of how many lifetimes he lives in it spends, he doesn't become upset with his own condition, with his own material life. Bhavam anu again Jantur Vaibhava etasmin yam yam yonim anu vrajet tasyam nalabhyate nivriti navirajyate. Right, so karma it inherits one part of prema, anukula, but misdirects it towards oneself. And envy, it inherits another quality of prema, which is directed towards Krishna, or directed towards others. We forgot Krishna, but we direct it towards others. It's not for me, it's selfless. But it's selflessly evil. We wish others evil selflessly. We don't want anything for it. You can just have it. You can have my envy. I wish you did not exist. I wish you everything goes bad in you. And maybe we not verbalize it like that, but that's the underpinning of our envy. Like that. So see how this prema, as compared to milk, separates into these two substances. So Prabhupada continues. We'll conclude that letter. Because we cannot find anything without faults. We want to become void, merge nothing. I think this is utopia, to become void of personality. So Prabhupada combines that philosophical conviction, which is based on envy of Krishna. I know there is somebody who enjoys everything, somebody who everyone loves, somebody who everyone serves. And I forgot who that person is, and that's me, probably. I have to remember. That's the basis of impersonalism, of voidism, and it's deeply infectious. It's deeply contaminating. We cannot really resist. There are no safeguards. There are no protective measures that could be effectively used to counteract that Mayavad philosophy if we exposed to it for a long time. And the evidence for that is, of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intolerance of Mayavada and his pure devotees. Bhagavan Acharya, one of the great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, who by his nature was very open and simple, and you could say even naive. And he would get in trouble himself, and he would also get others in trouble. He was the one who sent Chota Haridas to beg for rice from the house of, what was the name? Madhavi Devi? Right. He was the one. He didn't think about consequences. Out of his eagerness to serve Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he sent Chota Haridas. We should be very careful, especially those of us who are responsible for devotees' lives should think, oh, if Brahmachari, if I send him there, he's alone, and there'll be a lady alone, it's not the right situation. No, he shouldn't be sent. Or he should be sent with someone else. Like that, we should think about these things. We shouldn't be too oblivious to the stark realities of material life. So he was very open and very simple-hearted. And his brother, Gopala Bhattacharya, came from Varanasi, I think he came. And he was a staunch Mayavadi. He expertly described Vedanta Sutra. And in his naivete and in his simplicity, Bhagavan Acharya said, oh, let's go and listen to Vedanta Sutra, explained by my brother. He told no one else but Sarupa Damodar. He said, okay, let's go and listen. Sarupa Damodar became indignant. He became, actually I should read this for you. Anyway, if I read that, I'll get stuck on it. I won't read. But he said, what are you doing? This is Mayavada. If anyone hears Mayavada, his whole spiritual life becomes ruined. And Prabhupada writes in the commentary, there are many statements like that, that even if a Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Prabhupada quotes him, says, even if a Mahabhagavata listens to Mayavad philosophy properly, relate with realization, then he becomes undermined in his faith in Krishna. Not because of the intellectual convictions that conveys. It's deeper than that. You cannot counteract it, just like we cannot counteract poison, like cyanide. You just think, yeah, just take it in. It's okay, I'll resist it. It won't act on me. It doesn't work like that. It will. So Prabhupada explains that no matter how exalted you are, you will be affected by Mayavad, because it resonates deeply with the sense of independence of the living entity in the material world. But what if a person is pure devotee? There is no sense of independence in his heart. That was the counter-argument of Bhagavanacharya. He said, no, come on, we are staunch devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nothing will influence us. We can listen, no problem. But then Swarupa Damodar said something very important. He says, if you listen to that, just by the very fact that you listen to that, and do not object to that, do not stop that offender, you become complicit in the crime. Just like if your friend is being chastised or offended or ridiculed or criticized or humiliated or blasphemed, and do not say anything, it might not affect your relationship with that devotee, but just by the very fact that you were there and you didn't object to that is a betrayal of your relationship. So that's what he said. If you are there and you tolerate that, then you're not a Vaishnava, because Vaishnavas cannot tolerate that. And then Bhagavanacharya became ashamed and fearful, and then he stopped talking about visiting Gopala Bhattacharya. So that's how Prabhupada explains it. So we'll continue. I guess we'll just finish the letter and finish the class. Even though I had some other things to discuss with you, but at least we have spoken about Prabhupada's words today, and so it's not time wasted, I guess. So if there is something slight, if there is sometimes slight disagreement between devotees, it's not due to impersonalism, but it's because they are persons, and such disagreements should not be taken very seriously. The devotee is always pessimistic about the material world, but he is very optimistic about the spiritual life. So in this way, you should consider that anyone engaged in Krishna service is always the best person. And then he concludes by a very important paragraph, the last paragraph in this letter. Then he sweetens the pill for Srila Prabhupada, for Atreya Rishi. He sweetens the pill by saying, I'm very pleased that you are assisting your god brothers so nicely. Yes, this is our real position, to be servants of the servants of the servants. And by your quiet and humble attitude, quiet and humble, loud and humble, or quiet and proud, quiet and humble, you shall set the example of Vaishnava, so that all may learn from you. And very soon their puffed up attitude will disappear, and they will come to you and seek your advice in matters. That's how Prabhupada concludes. You just be humble and quiet, and inspired by your humility and quietness and determination to serve, they'll come and ask you, what should we do? You're so humble, you're so quiet, what should we do? How should we correct our ways? And their puffed up attitude will disappear. Prabhupada doesn't say along with yours. He says very expert. Like that. So anyhow, the verse was about something else, but again, there's an altercation between the devotees here. Both are devotees. Not only that, but in the Shastra, Lord Krishna himself, Lord Narayana, instructed Bhrigu and other great sages about the glories of Lord Shiva. He told them, someone who blasphemes Lord Shiva, who doesn't see him as me, he doesn't see me and him and me, like that, he won't be able. I can quote you that verse. It's in Hari Bhakti Vilasa, Sanatana Goswami says something to be mindful of. He says, Parat parataram yanti narayana parayanaha nate tatra gamishyanti ye dvishanti maheshwaram yomam samachaye nityam ekantam bhavam ashritaha vinindam devam ishanam sayati narakam dhruvam. It is a fact that the devotees of Lord Narayana go to Vaikuntha, but if they are envious of Lord Shiva, then they cannot achieve that supreme abode. Even though one may always worship me without deviation, if he blasphemes Shiva, he will go to hell 10,000 times. So, but of course we know that sometimes we get instructions, but it takes time for us to learn how to follow them, and that learning might also be unnecessarily experiential learning is glorified in the modern world, but Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Instructions that best to hear and learn by hearing, not by experience of some unfavorable conditions and consequences. But anyhow, Bhagavatam is for us to learn from these great personalities. We shouldn't be lured into thinking that they are infected with the same faults or anarthas as we are. Sometimes, and most of the time, we should think they are just like actors playing different dramas for us to learn from them, and not to behave the way they did for our benefit. I'll stop here. I don't know if you have any time for questions. What we're supposed to end at 9 o'clock, I guess, right? No, it's already 9 o'clock, 9:02. But if there are any comments or any additions or any corrections, you're most welcome to add them. As I said, I didn't plan on speaking on that letter for too long, but anyway, Prabhupada is irresistible. Once you start commenting on his words, then never stops. That's all? Or you have a question? I don't know who I should ask for permission to continue with questions, Prabhuji. Please, because I'm a guest here, so I don't know what the protocol is, but I will be very happy to discuss questions if there is time for that. Can I? Okay, thank you. Those who worship Lord Shiva and become deviated from the right path? Are you asking about them? So those who worship Lord Shiva and because of the curse of Bhrigu Muni become diverted from the proper path, do they still qualify for Sayuja Mukti? That's a good question. I guess there is at least one pathway to Sayuja Mukti that they can achieve by being killed by Krishna. They hang around long enough and wait for the next arrival of Krishna, and they're envious enough of Krishna to deserve his attention. Then they can be killed by him and get Sayuja Mukti. Prabhupada gave a very interesting explanation of Sayuja Mukti once. He said, he came to London, and somehow devotees arranged for a helicopter to take him from the airport, from Heathrow to the Bhaktivedanta Manor. It was very expensive, but somehow they hired a helicopter. So Prabhupada did fly in a helicopter once. And they flew, Mukunda Maharaj told the story, they flew Prabhupada from the helicopter. He was not happy with that, says too much time and too much waste of money, why couldn't have we gone by car, but anyhow it was too late. It was booked, so he took that helicopter flight. And as they approached it was more convenient, of course, you can fly, go as the crow flies, they say, in a direct line, bypassing all the traffic jams. So when they came to the Bhaktivedanta Manor lawn, and they were supposed to land there, the devotees in their exhilaration and their happiness to greet Prabhupada, especially to greet to him in such a literally descending from the sky, literally, quite literally. So they all poured out of the Bhaktivedanta Manor and they assembled their chanting kirtan on that lawn, which was supposed to be the landing pad for the helicopter. And so the helicopter couldn't land. And they were all waving their hands from below, saying, Hare Krishna, and the pilots and the devotees accompanying Prabhupada was also they're trying to motion them, just move aside, let us land, but they thought they were also greeting us and chanting there. So it went on for some time, and finally somebody understood that probably they wanted to land, so we were obstructing the landing, so they moved aside and that helicopter landed. And Prabhupada went straight to the temple and gave a class. In the class he said, this is how the impersonalists feel. They get stuck, like I was stuck in that helicopter, and all I was thinking about, when are we going to get down? When are we going to get down? When are we going to get down? Like that. That's all I thought, Prabhupada said. And the same as impersonalists, when they get in that liberation, Yayujya, all they think is, when I'm going to get normal. become active again. They get bored, Prabhupada said, so they fall out of that impress. Aruhya Krishna Parampadam Tatah Patantya Dhonadrita Yushmanungraya. They descend back into the material condition because they cannot take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, which are not manifested there. Krishna doesn't visit Brahman. He is not interested. Prabhupada writes about it in the 8th canto of Bhagavatam. Krishna doesn't know what's going on in Brahmajyoti because he is not interested. Nothing is going on there. Not very interesting. It's boring. But for us Vaishnavas, if I may bouncing off your questions, add something else. Jiva Goswami adds an important point. He says in that verse, Aruhya Krishna Parampadam Tatah, that they fall down from that Yanera Vindakshi Vimukta Main Tvayasta Bhava Avishuddha Buddhaya. Aruhya Krishna Parampadam, they do attain that Parampadam, but then Paitantya Dvo, they fall down again because of the inability to take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Jiva Goswami remarks something very important. He says, in this verse, the word feet is used in the plural. And Krishna usually has 2 feet, usually. Of course, sometimes he has forms as like Kurma or Varahadev, so he has many, more than 2 feet, lotus feet. But usually he has 2 feet. And why is it mentioned, why are the feet mentioned in the plural, not in dual? In Sanskrit you have singular, dual, and plural. And he says because the feet referred to here that impersonalists fail to take shelter of are not just Krishna's lotus feet, it's also the lotus feet of Krishna's devotees. So for us, we may have already taken shelter of Krishna's feet, 2 feet, but if we don't take shelter of Krishna's devotees' feet, then we'll also fall down. It's not exactly the same as for impersonalists, because they don't have any hope at all, unless they're blessed by Lord Shiva. And the Narada Muni, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, explains that the souls in Brahmajyoti, they become shaken out of their hopeless boredom by Shiva and Narada traveling through Brahmajyoti and singing the Lord's glories. So instead of falling down to the material world, such fortunate Sayuja Mukta Jivas, they follow Lord Shiva and Narada Muni wherever they go, and they join them. They become inspired by their kirtan. So it's like Harinam during coolies. Like they go through that Brahmajyoti with hopeless jivas packed into that Brahmajyoti, and they chant Krishna's names. And like Harinamananda Prabhu was in his class in Melbourne last month. I was in Melbourne. He told us about their experience, how they chanted in the coolies, and they're all intoxicated and completely bewildered, but they love devotees' kirtans, and they follow devotees wherever they go. And then they went back to their hotel, and the young people, intoxicated, they wouldn't let them go. They would chant, one more song, one more song, one more song. They wouldn't let them go. So the same way, Lord Shiva and Narada Muni, they travel through Brahmajyoti and they attract these Sayuja Muktas to the spiritual world. So even there they give hope. But the curse of, that's probably the last thing I will say, the curse that Bhrigu Muni utters here, Jiva Goswami and Sanatana Goswami analyze it very thoroughly. They say it's applicable only to those who worship Shiva as separate from Krishna. Then it applies. And it's not a curse, it's a blessing in disguise, because Lord Shiva doesn't want to be worshipped independently of Krishna. Najato jagadisho ham napi Krishna kripaspadam aham tadasa dasanam sadanugraha samuka kamukaha. He in Brihad Bhagavatamrita tells Narada, I am not an independent master. Najato jagadisho ham, I'm not Jagadish. Napi Krishna kripaspadam. I didn't attain even 1 drop of Krishna's mercy. But what I want to do is aham tadasa dasanam sadanugraha kamuha. I always desire just 1 drop of Krishna's devotees' mercy. That's my position. So when that Bhrigu Muni uttered that curse, whoever worships Shiva will become deviated from such shastra. It's a blessing. It's a blessing for those who want to worship Shiva by being deviated from shastra and being in this way kept at bay. And also it's, you could say, a blessing in disguise for Lord Shiva. He is very happy to be nobody else but Lord Krishna's devotee. Everything else is secondary at best. Please forgive me, I should stop here. It's like 10 minutes past 9. Prabhuji, does it answer your question? I'm sorry, I was just rambling on, and but I hope it does answer your question. Was last story about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was in, was it Simanta Dweep? I think he met a lady, and that lady was very noble looking, very well dressed, and her eyes were swelling with tears. And he said, as it's supposed to be done, if you see a lady in distress, you should offer her help from a distance if necessary for brahmachari, but it's the dharmic injunction. If a brahmachari walks through the forest and sees a lady in distress, he should from a distance offer respects and tell, lady, my dear lady, is there anything I can do for you to help you? Like that. So he said, what is it I can do for you? Why are you so distressed? And she said, because the Vaishnavas don't give mercy to me. I try to get association of devotees and they refuse me. It doesn't sound like Vaishnavas. They're very merciful. What's your name, O noble lady? I'm Mukti Devi. Please, Vaishnav Thakur, be merciful to me. And Vaishnav Thakur ran away from that place. So devotees are not very eager to come anywhere close the word Mukti, unless it's necessary for Krishna's service. Thank you very much, and I want to thank you for your wonderful hospitality here and wonderful temple. I haven't been fortunate enough to have a lot of interaction with some of you, or most of you, but Shishirada Gopinath and the devotees here in Prabhupada, very merciful, and the atmosphere is so inspiring. Tonight I'm leaving, and hopefully I'll be able to, on the way back, I'll be able to be of some service to you. I don't know when will that happen, but I have that aspiration. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premanande.